Good morning and welcome to Backyard and Beyond. This morning we're visiting with John Jensen and we have a new, leave it to John, a new thing happening in Elkhorn. It's going to be a cream and egg museum. So, John, where did this idea come from?
Well, I guess everybody who collects cream separators starts the same way. They're at an auction and an auctioneer says, well, somebody give me $1 for this cream separator. And I said yes. And I learned more about it, and the more learned about it, I discovered that, yes, they were so important. If you look back 50, 60 years, this economy was based on dairy and poultry. Uh, Farmers milking cows by hand and taking cream and eggs to town is how they bartered for their groceries. And I just became more intrigued with it, and I said, wait a minute, this is all being forgotten.
Yes, it is, because most young people have not experienced any of this kind of thing.
Right. And so I learned more about it, and I discovered, yes, it should be fun to have a cream and eggs museum and tell people about how things worked and what they have.
Now, when you're planning this museum, you are planning to have a place where you can not just see things, but maybe experience it. You're going to have a stage there, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I want to have a stage so I can have a demonstration of a cream separator and washing the cream separator, which women didn't like, and maybe some other things. But I want to have it so I can have enough seating for a school bus full of kids. So that way they can come to Elkhorn and they can see my cream and egg museum and then see the other things. Make a whole day of it there.
Sure, sure. Lots of things to learn and see and do.
Hmm.
Now, cream and egg, yeah, I think for those of us who remember, cream and eggs do go together, but why is that?
Oh, it was just a small business enterprise there. When the farmers first came here, they have cows. Cows would turn grass into meat or milk, and then they'd milk them, and then they'd separate the cream and then sell the cream to a creamery, and also have chickens too, and that way they could take the eggs to town together. And for women, that egg money was their first taste of independence, and that was important.
Important is yeah, because that's what they had to spend, and sometimes it was the only thing they had to spend on everything they needed, not just personally but even groceries and so on. So for some women that was just so important, but they had to work for it. I mean, they had to go out there and take care of those chickens and
Oh yes,
collect
yes,
those
yes.
eggs.
Oh yes, and I started out as just a cream museum, but I discovered that no, cream and eggs are so intertwined; they had to be together. And the more I learned about them, I discovered how important they are. When they got their baby chicks in the spring, whether they hatched them out themselves or if they had them delivered in the mail, they had to have a brooder and keep them warm, and they get bigger, and then they go outside in the summer there, and then in trees, and then in the fall you had to go out and catch the chickens at night and put them in a chicken house. And then as they got bigger there, then you have to go out and collect the eggs, which wasn't always the most pleasant experience. Tell me about
Not, yeah, I
yours.
was going to say not one of my most pleasant experiences. I wasn't very old. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, but I had to go out and collect eggs. And those darn hens always picked at my hands. I hated it.
Oh,
The
yes,
mean
yes.
little hens didn't want their eggs taken away, but that
Hmm.
was my job. So we did that, and we did have quite a few chickens at that time. Um, in terms of the economy and so on, one of the other things that I think of is those women also use the bags for the chicken feed.
Oh, yes. When they got the chickens in the spring there, they had to have a special chicken feed as they got bigger there. And so stores, they'd have bags that were in like material, so that way they could make clothes out of them there. And I have a friend up at Elkhorn. He talked about that when women they'd come in, they always want the bag on the bottom. So
That's my favorite right down there.
yes,
And then you had to have a certain number, depending on what you're going to do with them. You might need more than one, so you had to make sure that there was enough of whichever one you wanted. So it kind of goes on and on. So we've talked about you're going to have this museum, but it's not opening for a little bit.
no, I'm trying to aim for opening date of April 22nd, which is Good Friday. And everyone who comes there will get a free seed potato because everybody used to plant potatoes on Good Friday and a paring knife that says Cream and Egg Museum. And I also want to have a book available for sale too.
But that we need to get working on right now.
Yes. I talked to Jumbo Jacks up at Audubon, and they said if I get everything to them by February 1st, they could have the book ready for my opening.
Okay, now all of this information in the book is not coming out of just your head, John. You need some help with this.
Yes, I do. I know a lot of people have different stories out there, and there's two ways they can contact me to tell me about them. One is if they write a letter to me and just send it to the Cream and Eggs Museum, P.O. Box 444, Elkhorn, Iowa, 51531, or they can call me and maybe we can get together and visit sometime. And my telephone number is 712-579-6482.
And if you're a little nervous about just going to John and talking about it, you can bring your friend along.
Oh, of course, of course.
2 or 3 or 4 people, you can work with all of them at one time. And a good thing is sometimes that reminds, each other remind them of stories.
Oh, yes. When you have two people together, you'll get 3 pages worth of information there.
And it is, when I say stories, it's not fiction, it's real life of what happened to people who are telling you these stories. And it's so important. We're, as you said earlier, we're going to lose that if we don't catch those stories now, because I'm not sure how young the people are. Maybe you've researched this. What is the youngest age of people who experience this?
I was amazed at how many people said they started milking when they were 8 years old. I mean, they'd get up and they'd milk maybe a couple cows, and then they'd get cleaned up and they'd go to school to walk to school a couple miles.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And right now, the way it is, my museum will be a nostalgic museum. That means that people can say, "Oh, I remember that. We used to have one of those. Our neighbor had one of those." But in 10 years, it's not. Those people aren't going to be around, so it's going to be an educational museum. And so people will say, "What was that for? What was so great about that? Or what's going on here?"
Yes. And saying that, you were telling me a story earlier about the De La Velle separator and how important that was to the space program. We're thinking cream and space program? How does that go together?
De La Velle was a fantastic person. He was from Sweden, and he invented the continuous centrifugal separation of multi-viscosity liquids, which means
Cream and milk.
Yes. But he thought he could spin that bowl spins around at 5,000 RPM. And he thought maybe he could use steam to spin it, but it didn't work. So he invented a nozzle. They just call it a De La Velle nozzle now, and the steam comes at 700 feet per second and goes out at 2,100 feet per second. And Robert Goddard, who was our space pioneer, said that our space program couldn't have gotten off the ground without the De La Velle nozzle. And if you look at any aeronautical book about jet engine design, you'll come across De La Velle formulas.
All right. So there's the connection. And, it's interesting to see those kind of connections. Now, we talked about, you want stories about eggs and chickens and milk and cream and cows and anything related.
Oh, yes. Like anybody that used to work in a creamery or used to be a cream hauler, or anyone who used to work in a hatchery, or also anyone that used to cannel eggs. Something that's fascinating about Elkhorn is the fact that they used to be one of the biggest egg places around. And in World War II, the women, they'd cannel eggs, and they'd write their name and address on an egg. They would go to some serviceman someplace, and they would get a letter back.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. We didn't need emails and websites and so on. We just put it on an egg. That's fascinating.
The first email, it stood for egg mail.
There you go. And also, we talked a little bit about, Christmas time, families get together. What a great time to tell stories.
Oh, yes, yes. If you want to start the conversation, just ask them, well, do you have any stories about a cow or any favorite cow or milking or the separators, or did you have any chickens, or have you?
Did you name them?
Yes.
Or good experiences, bad experiences, whatever.
And have you ever been chased by a goose?
Yeah, there you go. So remember to get those stories started. If you have stories in your head, John wants to know them so he can get them in his book. And again, John, give us your phone number.
Okay, 712-579-6482.
And the post office box is?
P.O. Box 444, Elkhorn, Iowa, 51531.
All right. Well, John, I'm afraid this makes us older than dirt. If you can remember blackjack chewing gum, soda pop machines that dispense glass bottles, or home milk delivering glass bottles with cardboard stoppers, you are older than dirt.
Okay.